In North America, the Nintendo Wii launched with 22 games, all of which I have played and reviewed on this channel. The Wii had a very unique launch, because these 22 Wii games had to do something that perhaps no launch games for any other major console release had ever had to do before. The Nintendo Wii's launch games had to sell the world on an entirely new control scheme. They had to sell the world on motion controls. These games had to teach the public how motion controls worked, had to prove that motion controls could work at all, had to demonstrate what new, exciting possibilities motion controls allowed, had to prove that motion controls could enhance and not detract from the experience of playing a video game. And more important than anything, these games had to prove that motion controls were fun. So the question is, 15 years later, did they? To answer this, let's look at the 10 best Wii launch titles. Starting with number 10, Monster 4x4 World Circuit. Okay, so critics gave this game terrible reviews, and I don't think anyone besides me has ever even heard of it, but this game is actually super duper fun. Monster 4x4 World Circuit is an arcade monster truck racing game. What makes it a good Wii launch title specifically is that this game really wouldn't be fun almost at all if not for the motion controls. The tracks are short and not especially interesting, there's barely any content, the mechanics are all pretty underbaked and uninspired, but it's still a lot of fun. Why? Well, part of the reason for that fun is its goofy style, but a lot more of that fun comes from the controls. The motion controls used for steering are perfect. Moving your arms up and down to control these giant slippery monster trucks is just inherently silly and fun. Wildly shaking the controller up and down to do a trick is goofy and fun. Monster 4x4 World Circuit was a rare example of a mediocre game made better by motion controls. This one proved that even if the game itself wasn't all that good, the motion controls could be, and can enhance almost any arcade experience. Number 9, Call of Duty 3. The Wii version of Call of Duty 3 cut all multiplayer modes from the game, both local multiplayer and online, leaving it with nothing but the single-player campaign. That single-player campaign allows players to act out being the star of a World War II movie. It doesn't try to be accurate or authentic to history, it tries to be a war movie. All that matters is that the bombs are bombastic, the firefights are intense, and that the action feels like a scene out of Band of Brothers. The motion controls in this game are very hit or miss, but the infrared pointer for aiming was phenomenal. The Wiimote is a sublime controller for shooting games, and Call of Duty 3 proved that on day one. The Wii's pointer controls for shooting are faster, more fluid, more accurate, and more intuitive than DualShock or keyboard and mouse, and I will die on that hill. Because of the Wiimote's pointer control scheme, Call of Duty 3, or at least its single-player campaign mode, was best played on the Wii. Number 8, Red Steel. Red Steel was, I think, the Wii's most ambitious launch title. This was the game that promised to change how you interacted with your video games. Motion controls were going to immerse you in the action in ways you had never experienced before. You were going to feel like you were in a sword fight, feel like you were in the midst of a gunfight. Unfortunately, the game was a pretty huge disappointment. The motion controls for sword fighting barely worked. The game used motion controls in ways that felt awkward and unnecessary, like thrusting your arm forward to zoom in on a scope. And even though the pointer controls for aiming were just as solid here as in Call of Duty 3, a lot of the game's action was linear, repetitive, and very gray and brown. And the game's very serious story was silly and nonsensical. With all that said, Red Steel deserves a place on this list for its ambition. It fell way short of its goals, but just that promise of what motion controls might be capable of, what it was attempting to do, was noteworthy. It would be a long time before a truly great immersive motion-controlled sword-fighting action game appeared on the Wii. But Red Steel and its mistakes did pave the way for that eventual release. And it must be said, when Red Steel is good, those somewhat rare moments, when the motion controls are working, when the gunplay is exciting, you really can get a sense of what motion controls are capable of. Number 7. Rayman Raving Rabbids. Raving Rabbids was the Wii's first ever minigame compilation. A genre that went on to become something of a plague on the system's library. Raving Rabbids was enormously popular, and the Raving Rabbids series would go on to become something of a flagship franchise for the Nintendo Wii. And it's not hard to see why. The style is quirky and weird and silly, and definitely something that's gonna appeal to kids, along with very simple and quick gameplay that, thanks to the motion controls, literally anyone can pick up and play. I personally don't find any of its minigames hugely interesting, but all those minigames are at least attempting to use motion controls in creative and different ways. And unlike Red Steel or Call of Duty 3, all of those motion controls do actually work, which is a bigger deal than you might think. A lot of the motion controls in these launch titles and other early Wii games just didn't work. Moreover, the developers of Raving Rabbids did create a game that was really only possible, or at the very least only any fun, with motion controls. Raving Rabbids absolutely did sell a particular audience on the Wii and its motion controls. Number 6. Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam. This is one of those bizarre video games that you have to ask yourself, like, how did this thing even come to exist in the first place? It's a Tony Hawk brand skateboarding racing game released exclusively for the Nintendo Wii, and it's actually kind of really good. Downhill Jam is one of the most unique racing games I've ever played. The tracks in this game were long, dynamic, and layered, filled with alternate routes, obstacles, and trick spots. The races were crazy fast, like you fly down these hills at death speeds. And most of the skateboarders don't even wear helmets. And most importantly, the motion controls are excellent. Driving games are a natural fit for motion controls. And I'd argue that almost any Wii racing game will be enhanced simply by using motion controls. Number 5. Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz. Alright, I'll admit it, I love monkey balls. Stick a monkey in a ball, force it to run a bizarre obstacle course, suspended in space, and I am a happy boy. The Super Monkey Ball series is another great fit for motion controls, because in this series, you don't really control the monkey. You actually control the entire obstacle course. You move the monkey around by tilting the obstacle course. Tilting the controller to tilt the obstacle course is intuitive and smart, and it works. The motion controls in this game were excellent and felt completely accurate. Now, Banana Blitz is not the strongest title in the series. It's brought down by a slippery, somewhat inaccurate jumping mechanic, some clunky boss fights accompanied by huge, frustrating difficulty spikes, and a slew of absolutely terrible, barely controllable minigames. But when Banana Blitz sticks to doing the things that Super Monkey Ball does right, it is really fun. Number 4. Trauma Center Second Opinion. Like Downhill Jam, this is another one of those sort of weird ones. It's an anime surgery arcade game with all the absurd melodrama and insane narrative twists that come with anime and all the suturing, slicing, and organ transplanting that comes with surgery. It's also really fun, but extremely difficult. Every single stage sends you into an entirely new surgical scenario, under tight time limits, trying to save patients who seem to die at the touch of a feather, whose bodies are being ravaged by sentient superviruses crafted by a literal god of disease, which you combat with Greek god-endowed surgical superpowers. But what else did you expect from an anime surgery game? And it's all expertly controlled with the Wii's pointer controls. Slice a patient open by drawing a straight line on the screen, suture them back together by drawing zigzags over the cut. It all works perfectly, and that is why this was one of the best games on the Wii at launch. Number 3. Excite Truck. I started this list by talking about Monster 4x4 World Circuit, which was a mediocre racing game made much more fun by the addition of motion controls. With Excite Truck, imagine you have an already great racing game and then added motion controls to it. Excite Truck is another truck-themed arcade racing game. The difference between this and Monster 4x4 is that Excite Truck is bigger, faster, crazier, and the motion controls are both more accurate and put to better use. In this game, you don't just use motion controls to steer your exciting truck, but also to control it while it rockets through the air, which is something your exciting truck is going to spend a lot of time doing. You use motion controls to perform mid-air tricks and to angle your exciting truck for perfect landings, which when performed successfully both provide essential speed boosts, making your truck go even faster. Also, Excite Truck is awesome. In this game, you are always rocketing through tracks at what feels like 1,000,000 miles per hour, while the track itself is transforming and morphing around you. Besides being an excellent showcase of motion controls, it was also a really fun game. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is one of the greatest games ever made. By the time Twilight Princess was released, Nintendo had gotten the development of 3D Zelda games down to a mathematical formula. Twilight Princess was fantasy adventure gaming at its dungeon diving, puzzle solving, boss battling best. This game was grand in scale. Its story was epic. Its characters and side quests were quirky and weird. The dungeons were the best and most creative in the series so far. Charging across open fields atop your horse through what felt at the time like an absolutely massive world was awesome. Everything in this game felt simultaneously epic and grand, while also being silly and bizarre. It's a masterpiece. Arguably, the GameCube version, which released a couple weeks later, is the better version of the game, since the Wii version didn't begin development until very late in the development process, so the motion controls feel very tacked on. But it's just such a good game, it's gotta be somewhere near the top of the list, right? Number 1. Wii Sports. Something you'll notice about this list is that it includes a lot of games that are using the Wiimote's pointer controls really well, but not as many that are using the Wiimote's motion controls as well. This is because, as it turns out, developing for motion controls is really hard, especially this early in the Wii's lifespan. So often, motion controls can feel clunky, slippery, confusing, or inaccurate, which just makes the game worse. To make motion controls work, you have to develop the whole game with motion controls in mind, not just shoehorn them in at the last minute in a rushed port job. And more than that, you have to make them intuitive, immersive, easy to control, and accurate. And that's not easy. Of course, it should be no surprise to anyone that Nintendo, the masters of video game development, figured it out first. Wii Sports was a cultural phenomenon when it first released back in 2006. Everyone was talking about this game. Everyone was playing this game. And more than that, millions of people who had never played games before were playing this game. Your mother was playing this game. Your grandmother was playing this game because the motion controls were so intuitive, so easy to pick up and immediately understand how to play. And once you started playing, the game was really fun. Every single sport was simple enough that anyone could get into, while still being complicated, immersive, and challenging enough to hold your attention. More than any other game at launch, Wii Sports demonstrated to the world that motion controls really could change the way you interacted with video games. Now, these launch titles were just the first 22 games released for the Nintendo Wii. 1,600 some games released for the Wii over the course of its lifespan. And on this channel, I am going to review every single one, or die trying. Oh yeah.